There is an incredible amount of talent in this group. It's an understatement. Please welcome Rayka Zehtabchi, Director of Period and of Sentence. Betsy West, Director, RBG. Marina De Tavera, Roma. Domee Shi, Director, Bao. Ai-Ling, Sound Editor, First Man. Lynette Howell, Producer, A Star Is Born. Nina Hartstone, Sound Editing, Bohemian Rhapsody. Hannah Beachler, Production Design, Black Panther. Louise Bagnall, Writer, Director, Late Afternoon. And please welcome Madeline Hammond, who has owned this panel since its inception.
Well, thank you. That was a nice welcome. I appreciate it. So for those of you who have been to panels I've done before, you know I like to keep it lively and fast-moving. And you remember I'm an overachiever. These are my cards this year. 9 women. Are you really? All right, but I'm going to put them here because I have condensed them into just a few pieces of paper. All right, I'm going to intro everybody. And what the structure of today, because we have so many great, amazing women, is I'm going to go down the row, and I'm going to give just 3 factoids of each person, just enough to whet your appetite. You've seen the clip, now I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. And then I'm going to focus on each woman and do a little bit of a deep dive, 5 or 6 questions about the film. And then once we finish that, we're going to come back and do a round robin, really fun and lively, and you guys may remember that from years past. And if we have time, we're going to do questions from the audience, okay? We'll have to see, you have to play it by ear. And if we get a really good question, I have the gift certificate from the local coffee place for the best question. I have this wired, in case you don't know. I have learned each year little things to do. All right. So, all right. I want to get everybody out of here because I think today there might be something else going on this afternoon. So I'm going to just start with Rayka Zehtabchi, Director, nominated for Best Documentary Short Subject. She is among Oscar's youngest nominees. She's a recent USC grad, recently directed a branded short for Netflix's digital series, What I Wish You Knew, which is focusing on non-binary gender identity. That's a mouthful. Born in Japan, and now I believe you live in LA.
I do.
Right. And recently graduated USC, as I said. Mm-hmm. All right, I love it. All right, Betsy West, co-director, producer of RBG. And just for inspiration, I brought my RBG action figure, which I'm going to put right here, okay? Just in case I forget where I am, I'm going to focus back on her. Betsy was nominated for Best Doc Feature, obviously RBG. She's an Emmy-winning filmmaker. Not just an Emmy-winning filmmaker, she's won 21 Emmys. Betsy, that's crazy. And I might say that's a lot of dresses. That's just a lot of everything.
It's the news Emmys. The bar is not quite as high.
Okay, all right.
It's here in Hollywood.
All right. Well, speaking of news, very strong background in news, 20 years at ABC, 7 years at CBS. She oversaw 60 Minutes for a time, and if she's not an overachiever enough, she also teaches reporting, video production, and documentary filmmaking at Columbia. Yeah. Marina De Tavera, I'm not going to say it as lovely as Roger did, so forgive me. So Marina De Tavera, actress in theater, film, and TV, mainly on the Mexican stage, and has worked with some of the most prestigious directors. She's nominated for Best Supporting Actress for Roma. Her most recent, I think so. Her most recent TV work includes a series called Ingobernable for Netflix and Falco for Amazon. She's received a lot of awards. Critics, Noms, Journalists Association of Mexico, currently lives in Mexico. Domee Shi, director, Pixar Animation Studios, director of the animated short Bao, nominated for Best Animated Short Film. The first woman to get an Oscar nom for a Pixar short. Yes. And I love this. She began as a story editor at Pixar 8 years ago and just worked her way up. And we're going to get more into that because that's pretty amazing that Pixar has allowed you to then write and direct your own short. Born in China, lived in Toronto, and now Oakland.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
That's a trajectory.
Yes.
All right. I like it.
A globetrotter.
She's a globetrotter. Ai-Ling, sound designer, supervising sound editor, re-recording mixer. Double Oscar nominee, Best Achievement in Sound Editing, Best Achievement in Sound Mixing for First Man. The first, hang on, now clap after this one. The first Asian woman to be nominated for sound editing, the first woman to be nominated for 2 Oscars. She and her partner Millie Morgan, her co-nominee, are the first female team nominated for sound editing. And I believe if there were an award for an overachiever, you may get it because she has over 80 credits on IMDb. That's crazy. Now, Lynette Howell Taylor, producer, extraordinary producer, I might say, founder of her own company, 51 Entertainment, nominated for Best Picture for A Star is Born. Her first nom. Your first nom? Oh. And Lynette has produced a bunch of films, over 30 credits on IMDb. My favorite, Captain Fantastic, with the great Viggo Mortensen. And show of hands, how many were here yesterday to see the tribute to Viggo? Was that not amazing? I love it. And moderated by the most wonderful moderator in the world, Mr. Pete Hammond. Figure it out. Yes. So great session. And Lynette also did Blue Valentine and many others, including, and Lynette, I had to pull this one out, Shark Night 3D.
People like to pull that one out.
I'm telling you, you got to own it, girl.
I own it.
Shark Night 3D. All right. Most recently, I think you just finished Brie Larson's directorial debut, Unicorn Store, that's going to be on Netflix. And then you got
5th?
Yeah. And UK Born. I did not know that. UK Born. Lives in LA. New mom.
Well, I mean, new mom the third time, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, new mom. Okay, right. Kind of new mom. New mom the third time. Nina Hartstone, who lives in the UK.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. You can, okay. Nina is sound editor, ADR editor, supervising dialogue editor, nominated for Best Achievement in Sound Editing for Bohemian Rhapsody. So I got to read you. Nina also has quite a lot of credits, 57 credits on IMDb, but I just got to read you something. So whenever you prepare for a panel, there's always press notes, and it's got everything about the film and everything about the characters and the director and so forth, but this is how the press notes started. The iconic intro of We Will Rock You, the soaring chorus of We Are the Champions, the mesmerizing operatics of Bohemian Rhapsody. And this is all Nina Hartstone. That's right, the sound. I love it. Hannah Beachler, production designer, nominated for Best Achievement in Production Design for Marvel's Black Panther, which, by the way, 9th grossing film of all time, 1.3 billion with the B. That's great. She and Ryan Coogler, director of Black Panther, worked together before, Creed, Fruitvale Station. And her designs were also featured in Moonlight, Oscar-winning film Moonlight. And you still live in New Orleans? Mm-hmm. Live in New Orleans. All right. And last but not least, Louise Bagnall, writer-director, nominated for Best Animated Short for her film Late Afternoon. She directed a number of short animated films. She's been a character designer on a kids program, and she live in Ireland still.
Yep.
And worked on The Breadwinner before,
yeah.
So I love it. So welcome, Louise. Welcome, everybody. All right, so now we're going to get to it. Okay, you ready? I am ready. All right. So I did the 3 factoids. Just keep it going. Now I'm going to do 5 or 6 questions, a little deep dive on everybody. But I'm not going to go down the row, so you're not going to know who I'm doing next. So, because I like to shake it up so nobody thinks, when am I going? We're going to start with Ai-Ling.
Oh.
I know. It's always good to be first. You know why? Because you did First Man.
Oh, okay.
All right, so you're first up.
Woman? No.
All right, and your name starts with an A. There's no other reason.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to ask you first, could you tell us how you got your start? Because as I read about you, and I saw that you majored in music audio engineering, I'm curious, and for for people in the audience that might be interested in this, how did you get into it? And because that's kind of an unusual major. So just give us a top line on how this kind of came about.
Well, I'm from Singapore, and so yeah, just growing up, my dad loves watching like Hollywood movies, and so I grew up, he only owned a couple of movies, so I watched movies like Terminator 2 like dozens and dozens of times, or Jurassic Park, but I was just interested in how the sound could immerse and bring into this other world, even though you may not even see it. So that one, with music audio engineering, is more about recording, learning about the physics of sound, and that's a great intro to introduce me into sound for film. And since there's no filmmaking in Singapore, and Los Angeles is the place to be, so I just wrote unsolicited letters to studio sound department heads or sound studio owners to see if I can visit and sit in and learn. And I was surprised that a lot of them replied yes. So I just traveled here when I was 19 and just met people and through connections found work.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I think that's pretty brave. You're 19, you leave Singapore, you come here when you're like, can I sit in and watch you? And then you came out here. That's pretty, were your parents like, go? Or were they like, what are you doing?
Yeah, well, they were, my mom and my grandma were supportive. My dad's, he's more open to it, but I had told them like, well, I'll try it for a year. If it doesn't work, I'll just come back.
Oh, and then it kind of worked. All right, I'm glad.
Yeah.
Now, can you tell us, sound designer, supervising sound designer, re-recording mixer. So those are big titles. And just for my edification and those in the audience, will you just sort of explain a little bit a day in the life and what the difference is among those titles? I'm just kind of curious.
So basically, typically when I start a film, I start off reading the script and all that, and thinking about and discussing with the filmmakers, what's important to them for the movie sound-wise, and think about what sounds we need to record. So as a sound designer and supervising sound editor, I would think about like what's the sound palette for the film, and either design sounds or record sounds for it. And then as a supervisor, we would then coordinate it with a team of sound editors who would either do sound effects editing, dialogue, or ADR and Foley. And then we'll move on in the post-production stage into the re-recording mixing part, where we put all the elements together. I know, because sound is kind of invisible, it's kind of unquantifiable. So sometimes when I try to explain to people what is sound editing and what is sound mixing, I kind of take it as like this idea that, like, imagine, sound editing is like a set designer, set decorator who would create and build this world where the film is. And then you move on to the re-recording mixing part, which is kind of like a cinematographer who would then, decide, in the scene, where to focus on, or how you light it, or maybe how you pan, or when to be close up, or how to show it. Gotcha. With all the elements put together. That's good. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for doing that, because I really, usually when you hear someone does it, you just figure, oh, the sound, but it's so amazing in First Man. So I have to ask you, how did you recreate those, the NASA, and when you landed on the moon where it was like super quiet, did Damien say, this is what I want, or did you envision it and go back to him? Just talk a little bit about that process, specifically about
the moon landing when they got on the moon.
Yes.
So for that big moment in First Man, when Neil lands on the moon, we decided to go soundless for an extended period of time. And typically, in the film, when you're saying, it's going to be silent or whatever, typically filmmakers still add like a soft, low tone to play under the scene. But in this case, we decided to just go play it without any sound. And, it kind of starts off with inside the lunar lander. Neil and Buzz, after they suited up, they were trying to open the hatch door to get out of the lunar lander onto the moon. But through our research, there were some, we learned that they couldn't open the door because of the air pressure difference. And so we used that idea and created air suction sound so that by the time they open up the hatch door and the camera zooms out onto the moon, you hear this like sudden crescendo of air rushing sound, and it builds up for a really quick second, and it just immediately drops into like complete silence, because mainly Damien, the director, he wanted to kind of surprise and overwhelm the audience with this massive sensory overload, and suddenly, you know, you're on the moon and it's completely silent, and you know, with this difference in aerodynamics, it kind of makes this silence like feel really deafening and suffocating.
Right.
And we, you know, stay in this silence for a while because it kind of has this weird effect. You know, we stay in silence for a lot longer than what other films typically would, at least in Hollywood films. And in this silence, you know, you kind of like take in, it allows you to take in the image and the reality you're finally
You feel like you're there. You absolutely do. Well,
yeah.
that is excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Hannah, you're up next. I know, right? I know, you never know. It's crazy.
Expecting that.
Okay, I know. Because it's B. That's what I know. Okay. All right. If you can't tell, I'm kind of organized about it, but I know.
I'm looking at all of this.
Nah, don't even worry because it's all here. It's all good. Okay, Hannah, I have to ask you a little bit about your start, how you got into becoming a production designer, and take me back a little bit to when you were younger. Did you have a fascination with architecture? Was it just, did you always have a sense of style, or did it evolve into this? How did you get into it?
My father was an architect and my mother was an interior designer, so I grew up with like the house constantly.
Well, then this is a genetic predisposition, I would say.
You know, so the house was constantly changing, and I was, you know, my dad was like, "You're 9, here's a chainsaw, that makes sense." And, you know, let's go cut down some trees and let's build stuff. You know, my mom's like, "Yeah, it's perfectly fine." In the 70s, you know, they didn't really care if you lost a limb, so that we were good. And so I kind of learned, and then I worked at his office, you know, when I was in, you know, elementary school and middle school. It was mostly just taking out the garbage. You know, it was a lot of labor. And, but I grew up, like, you know, laying on my mom's sample books of carpets and wallpapers, and then I was like, I'm going to be a fashion designer. So my mom got me a form, and I, you know, became obsessed with New York, and I wanted to go to, you know, design school for fashion, which I ended up doing in Cincinnati, Ohio. Shout out to the Buckeyes. Nobody? Okay. And everybody's like, okay, well, maybe not. But, you know, so, and then I, you know, left, and I went into English literature, and my dad was like, well, you're not going to do anything with that. And then I left school altogether. I discovered, like, I could, like, photography, and my friends were in bands, and my friends like, make a music video. Let's make a music video. And then it started with that.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and that kind of fell into the art department because I was pretty sure I was going to be a director. I'm like looking at all the directors, like, because that did not happen. And a friend of mine was like, hey, I need help scrubbing this kitchen floor and painting this wall in this really disgusting house. Can you come and help? And I was like, of course. And, you know, $50. I was like, of course, I'll do it. And I was like, I love it. You know, I'm going to do this.
That is great.
My mom was like, really?
Yeah.
You're scrubbing something? I'm like, yeah, but it's work. It's like, you know, so that's kind of how I got into it.
But it makes sense because you started off at a young age doing labor, so you were used to it. You like building, right? Painting. Yeah. So it all kind of, I guess it's not really a coincidence.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you, lean into the mic a little tiny bit more.
Okay.
All right. All right. So now, those are the early years. Now I'm going to take you back to most recently. Tell me about traveling through Africa with Ryan, how that was, what you saw as inspiration for Black Panther, what elements you chose from Nate, like how does that come about?
You know,
locations, all the locations.
Yeah, because we went all over South Africa. Basically, we traveled up the coast from Cape Town all the way up to Ladysmith, and then I did that like 4 times before the group came. And then when Ryan came, because he had been there before I started, and then we all went together. And when he came, we were looking at everything. I mean, you look at the grass, you look at the vegetation, you look at the mountains, you look at the way people are dressed, the way they speak, the way they approach you, what is everybody's habits. You notice that there's a lot of walking, and there's the different, going to the different townships, and then going to the different towns that had been basically, colonized, and sort of talking to just people there and asking them about what's the story, and hearing the same story from different perspectives, because that's basically, when you're building a world, what you have to remember to do is that it's not one perspective. It's not just me, it's not just Ryan.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people involved in how we create a society. So that's really kind of where we started, and the things that we wanted to find in Africa. And then it's sort of, Ryan has the question of what is it to be African, and that was something he was searching for. And I was searching for that, but I was just kind of trying to find out, like, for me on a personal level, like, what is my ancestry, what is my heritage, and how do I fit into that? And how do I show that then? Because I'm not African, I'm American, so I'm making a fictional African nation, and I just had to...
A utopian nation.
A utopian, well, a little bit. We had to go, I'm not going to do too deep of a dive, but we did talk about it. Like, is there jail? Is there, what's the consequences when somebody does something? What kind of things? If you have everything, what would you, commit a crime for?
Right.
What are those things?
Where's the conflict?
Where's the conflict? So we did talk about these things and created that within our world. Not that it was shown on screen, but for our understanding of how Wakanda worked, we needed to work out, like, how does money, do they have money, which they don't.
Transportation.
What's the transportation? Is it all in trade? Do they use the Kamoyo beads for money? So, you do, and it goes a lot deeper than that. So that's just like on top of the layering that, yeah.
Well, you made a comment about my cards. I heard you did a 500-page Wakanda Bible.
I did.
All right, so I think you win.
Everybody keeps asking me, when is that going to get published? And I'm like, you got to talk to Marvel about that.
Yeah. So it was 500 pages? Was it, so, yeah. And did you distribute it to people? Were they like, thanks?
There were two. So there was like a 400-page one that I did before I got the job, and then there was a 500-page one that I worked on for 9 months.
Oh, good God.
Yeah. And Ryan's got both of them. Like, you still have those things? I have the 500-page one, but he's got the other one too. So there's a little over 1,000 pages about Wakanda from me. From me.
Well, I don't even know what to say about that. I think what I love about that is that you started with kind of a blank page, and you just made the most extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
I give you a lot of credit. That's good, because you had nothing to go by. I mean,
yeah.
Sure, there's 20 Marvel films, and I'm sure there are elements that you looked at, but there was nothing like Black Panther, so.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I look at Stan Lee and Jack Kirby as the beginning architects of Wakanda, and really wanted to pay homage to them as well and what we created. So we kept some shapes and forms from the original Wakanda in '66, and then used some shapes and forms from Ta-Nehisi Coates' version. So yeah, it was, it really was from nothing and just your imagination and hoping that people would just sort of, it would resonate with people. And then I did a lot of stuff for me. There's like a lot of stuff in Wakanda that I just did because I could.
Because you could.
You know what I mean? Like,
it makes me, honestly,
it is.
I'm not just saying this, it makes me want to see the film again and look at it through those eyes, because I think I must have missed a lot of the...
Well, the one thing I'll tell you, there's like, when you're looking at the palace, when they first fly in and they're looking at the palace, there's these two sort of rounded buildings that sort of flank the palace. So there's sort of adobe, a little bit of the Timbuktu type buildings. And I put those there, because one day Ryan walked into my office, like the first day I was there, I'm like, oh my God, I'm at Marvel, this is crazy. And Ryan walked in, he's like, okay, so I'm gonna need to know everything. And I was like, everything, what do you mean? And he's like, what streets, what is the history of the streets, like what's in every building, what do people do, where's the school, what's the university, who teaches them, and that's when I really am gonna have to make a real, okay, God, civilization. And so I put these buildings in there, and I'll tell you the reason why I did it was I, don't really know, I think a lot of Black Americans don't know their history beyond the 17th century before 1600s when the first slaves were brought to the Americas. And so, you know, you just don't know. You know, I don't know where to look for it. I don't know how to find it. I don't know what my DNA is completely and 100%, because a lot of people had to survive for me to be here. So I said to myself, and I'd been searching for that answer for a long time, and I said to Ryan, he's like, what are those buildings? I said, those are the records halls. Like every single piece of information about this society before it really even became a society is in these buildings, or no Wakandan will ever have to wonder about their history, about their ancestry. That stuff is stuff I did for myself. So there's a bunch of that in
there. That's amazing. Okay, Rayka. Let's talk about period end of sentence. And first, for those that might not have seen it, just give a quick top line. You saw the clip, you can get a sense of it, but tell us a little bit about what's it about, how it came to be, and what inspired you. Kind of give us the genesis of it.
I just want to say first that I'm overwhelmed and overjoyed to be sitting in a room with these incredible women. I mean, come on. I was crying backstage watching the clips. So our film is a short documentary, and it sort of focuses on this worldwide issue of women and girls who are forced to drop out of school because of lack of access to sanitary hygiene products. And our film specifically focuses on a group of women in a village in India that start a business making low-cost sanitary pads to combat this issue.
And then did you read a story about this? How did it get involved? And tell us about the girls at Oakwood.
So I had just graduated from USC Film School 2 years ago, and I was literally like the week after I graduated, I got a call from one of our producers, Garrett Schiff, and he was the father of a girl, he was the father of Ruby Schiff, who was one of the original girls at a high school in Los Angeles that was part of a club called Girls Learn International, and like during their high school club sessions, they would try to figure out how could we combat this issue and how could we raise enough funds to purchase a machine to install in a village, and how can we make a film about it. And they were doing it with their English teacher, Melissa Burton. So this is a very grassroots thing, and it's a first for all of us, I think.
It was literally a school project.
It was literally a high school project. And then I got the call from our producer, and I had known him through my boyfriend, who's DP and editor and co-producer of this film. And he was just like, hey, we're looking for a young female director. I don't know if you've ever directed a documentary before. And I was like, I haven't. Are you sure you want me? And then, do you want to come on board? And I was just so incredibly moved by this issue, and just surprised that I had not known about it myself. I was completely ignorant and had no idea that women around the world have to deal with this issue. And I was just so taken aback the first time that I entered Oakwood School for our first meeting with our producers, and realized our producers are like 15-year-old high school girls. And it made me feel so connected, because when I first started, I was 23 when I first started making this film. I'm 25 now, but I felt really connected to these women in India, and also to these young women who are devoting their time to this project.
Oh, I think that's so great. Well, you mentioned you focused on a village, and you focused on one particular woman. Tell the audience a little bit about why her, and what was so special about her.
So Sneha is sort of the woman that we focus on in the film, and she is like an anomaly. You enter these villages, and I think the general behavior from women, because what they've been taught is that they ultimately have no choice but to get married at a very early age, and to take care of the home and take care of the family and take care of their husbands. And Sneha was like, I'm not getting married. She wore like track pants, and that's not common. So she kind of went her entire life being laughed at in her village, because she seemed like an outsider, but she had this very anti-village mentality, and was like, I want to join the police force because I want to kick some ass, and I don't want men or anybody to tell me what to do. And she was part of this village, and so once we installed this machine to start this business, she was one of the original women working on this machine. And so we really saw the effects in real time, because as tough and cool as she wasn't talking to us about her period. Like, she wasn't saying a peep. And once she started working on this machine, she started earning her own wages and opening up about menstruation and selling pads to other local women. And she was using her own money and spending it on her education for the police force. So we were really seeing, the real-time effects of this machine and this movement.
Yeah, so please, if you haven't had a chance to see this, watch it. And I was so moved not only by the machine and how it gave women the courage to talk amongst each other, because before then they just didn't really, they were very isolated. And then they talked about periods and other things, and it gave them the confidence to do things they normally wouldn't. There was one particular scene where it shows this girl and she ends up buying a suit for her brother because she could. Because before then she couldn't. Okay, so look what I was reading, People magazine last night. I own it, it's all right. And in my People magazine, on the 3rd page, they had this ad for Tampax.
I was hoping it was Tampax, because I'm looking at the back and it says, "My dad is a serial killer."
Oh, yeah.
So, I was like, where is she going with this?
It's true. My dad was a serial killer. Oh, my God. That's so gross. I didn't even read that story, but I was focused on this Tampax ad, because it says, "You do you, period or not," and it has 2 girls, and they have like bicycles, and they're just talking. And when I read the ad, I thought, because I stopped and I looked at it, and I thought about the doc, and I thought, isn't it funny how we just take that for granted? There's ads in magazines, we don't even think twice about it, we just do it. In fact, I remember when I got my period, everybody was happy, and to think about how different it is in other places, and not just India. I learned there's other places too that are poor, that these girls, and they drop out of school. So anyway, I just wanted to applaud you, and before we...
Thank you.
Absolutely. And just before we wrap it up on you, can you tell everyone a little bit about the nonprofit that you co-founded called the PAD Project?
So I'm one of the original board members, as well as several of the producers on the film, and the PAD Project sort of serves as a resource for anyone who is looking to get involved in this movement, to either donate to raise more funds for more PAD machines worldwide, or just to start the conversation about menstruation. Since we released the film, we have now installed 2 more PAD machines in neighboring villages, and are really just looking to saturate the area with PAD machines.
It's great. Love it. All right, next up is Louise. Louise?
Hello.
Hello. Louise, tell us a little bit about, you saw the clip of Late Afternoon. Will you tell it, for those that haven't seen it, just a little top line of the story, your inspiration, and also how the funding came to be? I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so Late Afternoon is basically a story about an older woman who is suffering from dementia, and through the course of the film we see snippets from her life, memories that she goes back into and relives. And then as the film kind of builds up, you start to understand how her present situation is connected to her past. So it's kind of, it's relatively short, it's 10 minutes long or so. So you kind of see, I suppose, her whole life within this short film. Yeah.
And how long did it take you from beginning to end to get the short done?
So the film took about, I had it as an idea for quite a few years in my sketchbook and developing it slowly. But actually, once we applied for funding with the script, then I had 10 months to get it finished. That was the deadline. So in animation, that's quite a serious amount of work to do in 10 months, but we managed to do it. So we're really proud of the whole team. But yeah, it's a lot of drawings to draw. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And the simplicity of it with just the dots and the color palette. Talk to us a bit about the visual style, because I in particular, because I'm going through this now in my own family with a stepmother, I love the way you let the person feel their own emotions and through the simplicity of the story. So talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a kind of partly it's a personal preference for a kind of a simplicity with the character design and the approach. But also, I felt like it would allow the viewer to, I suppose, kind of meet the character halfway. So rather than being super expressive with the face, it kind of like we can read a lot more into it, and it draws the audience in more. They want to figure out what she's thinking and what's going on with her. And then also the kind of, so sometimes, for example, in some of the memories, we don't even see like any facial features. But I think that the sense is that in the memories, you know, even though she's living them, reliving them, it's not quite a full picture. You know, there's things are missing, and sometimes it's more about the overall sense of what the memory was like, or the overall feeling that she had when she had that moment in her life, rather than a specific detail. So I kind of wanted the film to be less about the specific details and more about the general feeling and the momentum and the kind of emotion connected to these times in her life that we see.
Oh my God, well, you certainly achieved that. And you were the voice of Emily, Rena.
I was one of the voices, yeah. So Emily, as I was saying, we go into different times in her life. So we had a great actress called Fanuta Flanagan, an Irish actress who did the voice of the older Emily. And then for a long time, we couldn't get quite right the kind of adult Emily, the younger adult Emily. And I was doing the scratch track for her for a while. And then in the end, it was just like, well, I guess I'm just going to do her voice now. So I had to listen to my own voice quite a lot, which was a bit weird. So I've now slightly disassociated it from myself. So that's always a strange one. But yeah, and you're kind of directing yourself in your head, which is also interesting.
But it's true. We don't think we sound like like you ever hear. No. Remember the old days when we had our the recording, and you hear yourself, you're like, who's that?
Yeah. So that was interesting. Luckily, I didn't have to like put on an accent or anything else. I just was able to a little bit be my own voice. So. And
then lastly is about the color palette. Did you use color to differentiate between time periods? What was that decision?
Yeah, the color played a big role in the film. It basically allows the viewer to kind of go with Emily into her memories. A lot of the times the color is helping it's kind of the thread that helps us to follow her through. The colors themselves, the colors we chose, the idea is that like in the present day, they're a little bit more muted and a little bit more calm, whereas in the memories they're quite vivid and punchy, you know. So most of the memory colors might be muted, but then there's a big punchy color, and that's kind of the thing that helps us to trigger the memory. The colors that we chose themselves, so we went, for example, for the early childhood memories, we were kind of going for a really vibrant red, really, like, you know, it's the color of her coat, which she obviously remembered as a child. She had this, you know, maybe her Sunday coat that she would wear, you know, very, you know, kept very clean and pretty. And then as the memories kind of, as she gets older and the memories become a little bit more complex and maybe, you know, they're not all necessarily happy memories, we brought a lot more, you know, diverse colors into the palette. We tried to kind of indicate how the colors reflect the time in her life, like maybe there's, you know, we went into more purples, cooler colors, and then started mixing them up as she becomes more overwhelmed with the memories.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That was great. I would encourage you to watch Late Afternoon and have maybe a tissue or two handy. That's a good one. All right, Miss Betsy, let's talk about RBG, shall we?
RBG, yes.
RBG. So, I mean, let's just clap for RBG.
Yeah.
Right?
Clap for her. For her.
Man. I love to see her described as an octogenarian rock star, because she is.
She is.
So before you tell us about how it came to be, because the story is fascinating of how it all happened, but I wanted to ask you, so you've seen my action figure.
Yes.
Everybody's seen this. And I read somewhere that people are like tattooing her on themselves, and there's all kinds of memorabilia and all kinds of merchandise. What's the weirdest thing you might have seen?
Let's see. I think the tattoos are pretty strange. And Justice Ginsburg herself, when she heard about this, kind of went, ew, why would anyone want to do that? So I think that's kind of the range where you're starting to, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so, but I heard it was because of this sort of, the way the blog just blew up, and I mean, the web just blew up, that it's sort of you and your producing partner said maybe we should do something on RBG and we should do it soon. So now take it from there.
Yeah, so Julie Cohen and I, who co-directed and produced the film, were talking in 2015 about the notorious RBG phenomenon, the memes, the t-shirts, everything else. Both of us had interviewed Justice Ginsburg previous to her, you know, exploding on the internet as a kind of superstar, and we knew the whole story of her history as a women's rights litigator. And you know, what she did, if you haven't seen the film, what she did in the 1970s as a young lawyer to secure equal rights for women under the US Constitution. I mean, back then, it was a really radical idea that men and women should be treated equally. Like, why would we do that, you know?
Right.
And she had the job of, and she gave herself the job, developed this project to basically make the arguments and convince the 9 male justices that, yes, the US Constitution should protect women. We thought that was a story that her fans would really like to hear. And we also just thought it was a natural for a documentary. Also, her personal story. We knew a little bit about the amazing love story, the challenges she'd faced as a young woman. And, you know, we looked at each other and said, someone's got to do a documentary about this woman, and, you know, it should be us.
And then you reached out and said, hey, we'd love to talk to you, and then what was her response?
Well, we wrote an email, and very quick response, but it was basically not yet. And this was in January 2015 when she was 82 years old. So we're like, okay, if not now, when? But then we thought, all right, she didn't say no. And so we regrouped, did some more research. About 3 months later, we sent her another email saying, okay, we know you're really busy and we don't have to interview you right away, but we'd love to get started on this project and to start interviewing your friends and former colleagues and other people. And we gave her a list. We wanted to show her we're serious people. This isn't just going to be some frivolous thing about, you know, the internet phenomenon. And again, quick response, first sentence, kind of discouraging. She said, I would not be prepared to give you an interview for 2 years. I'm like, okay. Then she said in the second paragraph, however, if you are going to be talking to people, you might want to consider. And then she named 3 more people who weren't on our list.
Well, that's a yes.
That's sort of like, okay, open the door, and if you can make this happen in 2 years, I'll talk to you. Basically. So.
But you know, it's fascinating because usually if you're doing a doc, I would think you would talk to the subject and then all the people surrounding. This you did inside out. You talked to all the people and then her.
And you know, at the time, again, a little discouraging, but it turns out that Justice Ginsburg's a really good producer because it was a great idea. We had, by the time we talked to her, almost exactly 2 years from the date that she said she would talk to us. I mean, she is a woman of her word. We had strung out the rough cut, and we really knew what we needed to fill from her. So let's say, you know, we'd been following her around the country and filming a lot of talks that she gives and doing all these interviews, and, you know, eventually we had a fair amount of verite shooting with her, including in the gym, which was, you know, quite amazing. But we, you know, we knew, oh, we don't need her to talk about how horrible it was at Harvard or the problems she had there, because we have that section already. But we do need her to talk about her mother. And we need that. And we do, you know, need her to talk about various points along the way. So in fact, waiting to talk to her almost last was fantastic.
And also, the country had changed in 2 years. So it was.
Well, although, you know, I mean, it was changing when we interviewed her. Was yes, it was as 2017. So yeah, we had a change in our political landscape. The Me Too and Time's Up movements hadn't quite happened then. They happened in the fall after we'd finished the film. But I think every single thing that it felt like everything that was happening politically in the country was making her story more relevant in many different ways. So yeah.
So you had, so now tell us, so you meet with her, you have an hour?
Yeah, well, we had, you know, again, we had followed her around the country. Overall, we spent, you know, over 20 hours with her.
And then tell us when you met with her, because now you had earned her trust.
Yeah.
What was the one thing, maybe a takeaway or something about her that maybe something we don't know about her?
Well, she's a very, you know, she's teeny. She's kind of shy in a way, recessive, and that makes her very intimidating. And you feel like, you know, you say something and she doesn't respond right away, you're just thinking, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. what did I say? Because that's just, she's not someone who fills the space. That said, as we spent more time with her, we began to see her incredible sense of humor. She has real wit. And she doesn't have time for small talk. So you get to the point or talk about something she's really interested in. What is she interested in? She's really interested in the law. That's her love. She's interested in her family, and she's interested in music and in opera.
Right.
You know, so you learn those things. I think sitting down with her and doing that interview was just an extraordinary moment. I mean, we're in the Supreme Court, and you know, in this big high hall with all the portraits around, and there, you know, there had to be like 8 public relations people from the court, you know, watching our every move. We did the interview, and then we had told them that we wanted to show her some clips, some excerpts from the film, but we didn't tell them what the excerpts were. Luckily, they didn't ask. So we showed her a few things, the picture, you know, material of her and Marty when they were young marrieds, which, you know, she was moved by, but then we said, okay, push number 5. And, you know, we started it, and she looks, she says, it's Kate McKinnon doing the dance, the RBG dance. No. And all the PR people, you know, their eyes widen. They're like, oh my God, what have these women done? And again, there's a pause, and she says, is that Saturday Night Live? We don't think she'd seen it before. Her children said she doesn't really watch television that much. Right. And we said, yes. She asked us the name of the actress. We told her, Kate McKinnon, and then she just burst out laughing. It was such a moment, and you could see all the public affairs people. They were like, phew, and then they all started laughing, you know. Oh, so it was a, you know, a great day.
Oh my gosh, that could have so gone the other way.
Yeah, yeah, but she's got a great sense of humor, including about herself.
That is really great. Yeah. I love that. Well, that's amazing, and again, how lucky! What just an experience. I don't think it is ever going to.
An honor.
It's an honor.
Let's say to be able to tell her story.
Right. Yeah. Before, I just want to switch from RBG, and I want to talk for a sec about something you did before about 4%. The 4% gender challenge. Yeah. So for those that don't know, there's a 4% challenge now in the industry, and I'm happy to say we're finally embracing it 2 years after you did your documentary. And it's to, well, you explain, it's to hire a woman director.
Yeah, I mean, the statistics are just frightening when you take a look at them, and the work that Stacy Smith has done and others at Annenberg to really highlight what the facts are about women in positions of power, and specifically directors in Hollywood. It's 4%. I think there's, and so I was an executive producer of a project about this. It wasn't I didn't direct it. Caroline Sue directed it and interviewed a number of women directors and DPs and others about, you know, the kind of challenges that they face. Why is it, you know, that a woman wins an award at Sundance for an independent film and
disappears.
Yeah, then what happens? A man wins an award at Sundance for an independent film, the next thing you know, someone's giving him $100 million to make a big blockbuster. I mean, the kinds of just subtle not so subtle discrimination that goes on of people, you know, the natural inclination, I think, is people just hire people who remind them of themselves in a way, and it's trying to get across the idea that you know, we're not talking about diversity as a favor. We're talking about diversity as something that we really need to do, that's important, that is going to help everybody in storytelling. It's going to expand the landscape. So that was the project. I think, you know, I've heard recently that in television there's been a lot of improvement in terms of women directing and, you know, having other leadership roles, not still so much as much in film. I mean, on a personal level, when Julie and I started the RBG film, I mean, you know, we're making a small documentary. It's not a huge crew, but we made a commitment to really look for women for all the key roles. And in fact, you know, our camerawoman, Claudia Raschke, our editor, Carla Gutierrez, our composer, Miriam Cutler, and on and on. I mean, every key role in our documentary was held by a woman.
That's great.
Yeah.
Love that. Excellent. Well, now There's another woman on this panel who's very fierce about this topic, and that's Lynette Howell Taylor.
Yeah.
So, and I applaud you, Lynette, because you have been outspoken. So before we get to A Star is Born, do you care to comment on what Betsy said about 4% or 50-50? Because you've been very much a proponent of this.
Yeah, and I mean, I sit on the board of the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, and you know, I think the work that Stacey Smith is doing is incredible and illuminating and essential. Yeah, I mean, you know, I took the 4% challenge, which for me is easy, to be honest, because I work with, you know, I have a movie in post with a female writer-director and have worked with many female writer-directors and have always, since my first movie in 2005, which was Half Nelson, which had a female co-writer and you know, with Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden, and really she was kind of co-directed that, even though she didn't take that directing credit on that one. And we had a very diverse and inclusive crew and cast on that movie. And so, you know, for me, it's, you know, we have, you know, I think as producers, we have such an incredible responsibility to do everything that we can to make sure that there's a diversity in stories that are told, because that's what audiences actually want. And so, you know, I started my own company and called it 51 Entertainment, which is, you know, really a nod to the fact that women are still the majority.
I was going to ask you, is it 51%?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nod to the fact that women are still the majority, and it's sort of like a quiet nod to the fact that I'm going to continue to make my own pledge to, you know, work with female creators and continue to make sure that there's gender parity in everything that I do. And that doesn't mean that I don't work with men. I mean, clearly I, you know, work with men too. It's just more about making sure that, you know, when you're in a position where you have the ability to hire, you have a responsibility to hire equally.
Fantastic. So now going back to A Star is Born, I want to ask, because that film is something about A Star is Born. It is just this enduring story. What is it about this? And what about you and your fellow producers that you decided we're going to remake this? Because I think the journey of how A Star is Born came to be is incredible. So tell everybody.
I think ultimately, I think we all want to see movies about love. And about how much we need each other. I think the movie, you know, makes you fall in love and then breaks your heart. And I think that, you know, stories of addiction, I think there's a lot of universal themes, and there's a lot in the movie that I think many people can identify with. You know, I didn't decide to remake it. I was very, very lucky to be brought into the movie by Bradley. He and I had worked together before on The Place Beyond the Pines, which was about 6 years ago. And so he approached me several years ago to say that he was remaking it and that he had a vision for the contemporary version that he wanted to make, and asked me if I would come and join he and Bill Gerber and produce the movie with them, which is not a phone call one gets every day.
No. I can only imagine.
You know, and so it was amazing. You know, I came on during the script development stage, and you know, was really, you know, he's one of the most collaborative people I have ever worked with. He is open to everybody's ideas. He encourages, wants, you know, your thoughts at every step of the way, you know, from you know, working on the script to being on set with him, you know, sitting behind the monitor, you know, every day during pre-production. I mean, you know, I was watching the movie at his house maybe 2 times a week during the editorial process and giving feedback. I mean,
he's a first-time director.
So he is a first-time director, and
amazing.
You know, but it's also a real skill. I mean, you know, I've worked with a lot of first-time filmmakers, and, you know, not all first-time filmmakers want that kind of collaboration and response, you know, and don't always know how to process. everybody's different opinions and still maintain true to their vision. And that's really a skill that he has. He will listen to any idea from anybody that wants to give it, but somehow he's still able to take those ideas and filter them through his own lens and through his very kind of clear, distinct vision that he has. It's an incredible way to work, because as a producer, you feel completely confident in what your filmmaker, your leader, wants to do, and that the movie that they want to make, and that you know that you can say anything you want, and no idea is ridiculous. You will never be laughed at. You will never be chided. There's no, it's free range to say, how about this? Have you thought about this? And he is open, but yet you know that if you have a crap idea, he'll tell you. He's going to, in the nicest way. Right. Actually, I mean, that's the thing about him, is that he's never going to be like, no, that sucks. He has this wonderful way of saying, let me think about that, which usually means that was terrible. But again, like having that confidence that you know that no matter what you say, he's going to ultimately be able to filter it and spit something back out that's going to be brilliant.
But it's so great that he's not dismissive. Because I think as women, we're often dismissed.
Yeah, no.
So that's so great.
I mean, he surrounds himself with male and female collaborators. His first AD is a woman, and I was very much a part of the process with him, and he's the opposite of dismissive.
Now, how about Lady Gaga? Being that she didn't have a lot of acting experience, how was that process? Did you have extra rehearsal, or how did that whole seamless integration happen? Because it seemed very natural.
Yeah, I mean, Bradley creates an environment for everybody to work, and including the actors. And that environment it feels safe, and it feels inviting. In the same way that I describe my ability to say to him, have you thought about this script change, or in the cut, like, what about if, I really don't think that line is working, or whatever that is. He creates exactly the same environment on set for his crew and for his actors. And so, I think, that they had spent a bunch of time together, and he really had built up trust with her, so that when she came to set, she was able to just be completely raw and vulnerable. But I credit both of them for that. I credit him for creating this incredible environment where she could do that, but she's also one of the most open actors I've ever seen. And she really just bears herself. And again, there's a fearlessness in, well, I'm going to try it this way and I'm going to try it that way, and she's not concerned about how she looks or comes across, or she just wants to do great work. And she was so inside that character and really became that character. And the truth is, it is a character. Everybody sort of references that this was sort of her from the past, and she definitely was channeling a little bit of that. But the truth is, that's not who. Lady Gaga is not Ally. That is not who she is. She is Lady Gaga. Right. And that's why she credits herself in the movie as Lady Gaga and not Stephanie Germanotta. But on set, everybody called her Stephanie because she was in this much more sort of raw, vulnerable place, but she created this character. It was based on some of her own experiences, but it was really a character that was created in conjunction with Bradley and the screenplay that she was given. And, she's a phenomenal actress. She's a powerhouse human being. She's an unbelievable musician. She, in terms of setting the stage for the way that the music came about and executive producing that, and she's a leader and a force, and I have so much admiration and respect for her. But then when I saw this other side to her, this actress, I was blown away. I think that she's literally nothing she can't do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. It's great. Well, speaking of phenomenal actresses, Marina, you're up. I know. Maybe we'll call you Lady Marina.
Oh no.
So tell us first describe your character a little bit, because I'm sure many people have seen Roma, but describe your character for those that might not have seen it, and a little bit of how you got involved with the project and how Alfonso found you.
First of all, I apologize if my English is not very fluent. I'll try to do my best. Well, Sofia is a character that's based upon Alfonso's mother. Her real name is Cristina Orozco. This is a film that comes out of Alfonso's memories. It's really about his childhood and about the two women that brought him up, Cleo, his nanny, and his mother. And she's a woman of the 1970s in middle class in Mexico City that faces divorce, which in that moment was very hard on women because they were stigmatized, pointed at, and also the children, and blamed a little bit of the situation. So she's going through that. Well, the film is like 1 year in the life of this family and of these two women, and it's the year where she faces that her husband left her with the responsibility of the children, and where she realizes who is her true accomplice in life, and it is another woman that comes from an indigenous community.
Oh. Now, there's so much secrecy, I heard, involved with this production. So at what point did you discover you were playing Alfonso's mother?
Well, to begin with, I didn't even know I was auditioning for a film that was going to be directed by Alfonso Cuarón. It was a very long casting process, and only in the 3 months I learned he was going to be the director of the film, just 1 day before I met him. So it was quite, but I think that was...
it's probably better.
Yeah, because then you don't, I mean, you just do your thing. I mean, as actors, we have to do auditions and castings all the time. It's not the part I enjoy the most, but we have to. So maybe if I knew it was a film that's going to be directed by him, I would be pushing more than maybe I should, because for this particular film, it was very important to be... I mean, I'm the only trained actress in the cast, so that, you know, he was looking for real people that will feel like the real characters, so it was important for me to be myself and not be trying to do something for Alfonso Cuarón.
Right.
So I think that's why they did it that way.
So sometime when a man says, "You remind me of my mother," that's not good. So, but I think in this case, it was probably the best thing in the world. There was just something about you. So I applaud you for that, because you're right. Without wanting it, you got it, in a way.
I could sense along the casting process that, because they told me it's about... Then it's a woman in the 1970s. They gave me a little, because I never read the script. I haven't read it till today. So that's, we worked without a script. So they only told me some information about her, and I could sense that I knew what they were talking about. Right. That I knew what they needed, that I felt that I could relate to it, and this is, of course, because of my mother.
That's great. What was it like working with Yalitza? First-time actress.
Oh, it was incredible. She embraced Cleo's character from the very beginning. Alfonso says, and it's not a joke, that for the second day of shooting, she was telling everybody what to do. She was remembering she was saying, no, that wasn't there before, the play wasn't there. You know, no, she immediately understood. And she is, the story is amazing, because she never even had the desire of being an actress or ever imagined that something like that could happen. And then she finds herself doing it in such a natural way, and for me, she was never a first-time actress. She was Cleo from day one.
She was. That's great. I love it. All right, well, next up is Nina Hartstone. Let's talk a little Bohemian Rhapsody. So Nina, you did Evita, Hours, Gravity. Been in the business 25 years plus. Yeah. What I was fascinated with is how you also worked your way up from assistant sound editor, dialogue editor, supervising dialogue. So just talk to us a little bit about how you got into this, because was it a natural evolution, or did it fall into your lap?
Hey, kind of. Well, basically, I went to school and went and did my degree at university in visual and performed arts, and. My father's a dubbing mixer, a re-recording mixer, working at Pinewood, but I've never actually worked with him. So on finishing university, I needed to get a job, of course, and I ended up making tea in the sound editing for £50 a week, and basically worked my way up. But in those days, it was very, very male-oriented, and I hid my degree. I didn't tell anyone I was working with that I had a degree because they wouldn't have hired me, I don't think.
Right. Or resented you.
Yes, exactly. And there were also quite a few sound supervisors who wouldn't even work with women in the cutting rooms. They felt we'd be a distraction. So it was kind of hard days, but those days it was on film, so I just worked my way up making the tea, trying to learn the process of filmmaking, and it was great starting on 35mm because it was such a slow process in those days, and you got to learn your way through it. And then I kind of rode the wave. It was just as after a year or so, the digital audio workstations started coming in, started using computers, and as someone who was kind of younger in there and keen to learn, I just spent lots of extra time learning each workstation that came in, all the different variations of them, to keep working my way up through sound assisting, and then finally getting a break to start editing some ADR, and then dialogues, and then supervising dialogue and ADR.
But the technology was really helpful to you because you were good at it, and I'm sure that some of the older...
Yeah, it's not something I ever learned. I just learned it on the way because even at university, everything was handwritten. I didn't have a computer then.
Right, amazing.
So, yeah.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that. For those who've seen Bohemian Rhapsody, that Live Aid scene was extraordinary. So from a sound perspective, tell us about how that came about, because you hear so many stories that the sound was in and then you had to take it out, so tell us about that.
I mean, you know, it's such a fantastic opportunity to be able to work on this movie and recreate Live Aid, such an iconic performance for Queen and Freddie Mercury. It's it was a very exciting opportunity for us to do it. Obviously, anyone can watch Queen's Live Aid set on YouTube. You can just click and listen to it. But we really wanted to create something where the audience who are watching it feel like they're attending Live Aid and they're enjoying that concert as it was back in 1985. So we did an awful lot of work, obviously, with the music and the crowd. We were very fortunate to have, through the band and their engineers, we had access to all the individual recordings from Live Aid, and luckily enough, they rolled separate stems, so we had separate vocal, we had separate audience, separate instruments and everything, so we did have all that at our disposal.
That's good. Which
was great, and meant that we could really move everybody around, and then recording the crowd was one of the big aspects, because all the emotion comes through. Obviously, Freddie has the crowd in the palm of his hand.
But that energy.
That's recreating the energy and making it feel like you were in that crowd with them was the big thing. We took a little bit of inspiration from Freddie and his AOs when he sings out AO and gets the crowd to sing back to him. So on set, filming Live Aid, there were 600 extras to create Live Aid, and it was a second unit shoot day, and basically, so we lined up line by line, but in the way of AO, so one line of the song, and then a gap, and then the next line of the song, and basically we did it in the same, a call and response kind of thing. So we play the audience a line of the song and then cut, so we got a clean recording back of them all singing it back. So that helped to start base our original track. Plus we had from Queen lots of audience crowds as well that we could use, and the original some of the original Live Aid crowds. And then we brought it down into the medium-sized crowd to record, which we did. I wanted to do it exterior at Shepperton Studios. There's some exterior space to record. We put 8 mics up, so we had them all. We got all the different distances and all the proximities, and we got a load of crowd in there. And it was unusually for the UK. It was a really hot day in July.
Wow!
And we had about 40 crowd, and we did them in banks of 8. We had a TV outside, and I jumped up and down in front of them and made them all jump up and down and punch the air and just give us the energy to feel like they were at that concert.
Right.
And did a few passes of running them through the entire thing. So by the end of it, their voices were raw, singing along. You know, they felt like they were...
And they were hot, sweaty.
Hot, sweaty, all of that.
But that's great, though.
So that was amazing. And then obviously the other main factor is getting, you know, Rami and the musicians to make it appear like they are actually doing it, you know. So we used Freddie's vocal, of course, because everyone wants to hear.
Yeah, I read to get his facial muscles just a certain way.
Yeah, Rami did an incredible job recreating Freddie's performance, and he always, you know, he was singing, and you know, so he really looks like he is belting it out just like Freddie does.
And he was.
He was, of course, but it was, you know, I had to kind of meld little bits of Rami's breaths and lip smacks and mic blows into Freddie's performance to be able to create.
Wow, it's pretty oh my gosh.
It sort of sounds like quite a boring technical detail, but that, you know, you really needed to believe at every single moment. To make that scene work, you needed to believe that Rami is singing with Freddie's voice.
Right.
So hopefully we've achieved that.
Ai-Ling is very impressed, right? Ai-Ling's like, I totally get what you went through on that.
Okay, she understands.
Right? And I heard that they recreated the entire scaffolding the way it was in 1985, and two of the original guys that did that were there. So you actually, it really must have been a step back in time.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, the attention to detail that went into. I mean, you've maybe seen on you know, on the internet, there's a side-by-side performances of, you know, Freddie and Rami, and the detail of all of it was incredible. And obviously, we had such an amazing ensemble cast as well. The guys playing, the members of the band did such an incredible job. But you know, we wanted the music to be powerful. We, you know, really fortunate with how it all came out, how it was all mixed together. The music, I think, it sounds incredible, and when you're on the stage, you hear it really present, and you go to the back of the auditorium. The other thing we were lucky enough to do was Queen were actually on tour during the post-production process, and they were playing a venue in the UK, a big stadium called the O2. And they invited us down so that we could actually record, we could take the music that we were going to use throughout the film and play it through Queen's actual PA and record it, worldize it, and record it how it sounds in a stadium. So there's shots when you're in the back of Live Aid, because you know, some incredible shots. When you go in the back of Live Aid and you hear it, you just feel like you're at a gig, because it's been worldized through the O2, and it just sounds incredible.
Oh my God!
So we had that.
All right, so were you a fan of Queen, or are you now, or do you never want to hear their songs?
Do you know what? I still love it. My brother was a huge Queen fan when I was growing up, so of course I would just be like, ugh, Queen, because I didn't want to like the same things as him. But it's one of the, you know, Queen's tracks, there are so many of them, and you've heard them. Well, for my generation, I've heard them all my life. They're like part of my DNA. I know all the words, even though I've never sort of sat and particularly tried to put an album on. And I always love Freddie. I just, you know, how do you not? He's just such an incredible performer. So yeah,
that's great.
Great.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. And now, last but certainly not least, is Domee. Let's talk about Bao. Okay. All right. First, for those that, well, how many people here have seen Bao or saw The Incredibles? So quite a few. Yes. But for those that haven't, just a top line, because I'm wondering, was this a little bit of a personal story of yours? Maybe as an only child, maybe it's something to do with your parents?
Yeah.
Tell us how it came about.
Yeah, so Bao was mainly inspired by my own life growing up. I'm an only child, and I felt like ever since I was little, my mom has treated me like her precious little dumpling. Like always watching over me, coddling me, helicoptering over me, making sure I'm safe. And I really wanted to just explore a story about this overprotective parent, this mom, and this literal dumpling that comes to life one day while she's eating her breakfast. And they go through the ups and downs of life together, and a lot of it is inspired by, you know, my own life growing up as an immigrant kid, just like the differences between me and my parents and how we slowly grew apart, but then eventually came back together as an adult. And I also wanted to explore just food, and like food as a language of love, like universally throughout the world, but also especially in Chinese culture too. My parents like never really communicated their love through words. Like they never really said, "I love you" or "I'm proud of you." Oh. But
they'll ask like, oh, have you eaten yet? Like, eat more. You're too thin. You're too fat. But like, you just keep eating. So food has always been like this.
Food's the way they communicate.
Yeah, food is just the way that they just showed their love for me, and I really wanted to show that in the short too. So we took a lot of time to just really hammer out the details of how the mom character makes dumplings, how she makes every single dish. Now, how did that,
because it's hard to animate food. I read it's one of the hardest things to do. So how did you get that dumpling just right?
Oh, yeah, that wasn't me. That was like our team of very talented effects artists. So it took our effects team 2 months to do that like 2-second shot of the hands folding the dumplings.
Amazing.
Because food is very like difficult to simulate on the computer because it's very organic. It changes shape, and computers are better at making like hard symmetrical objects look good, like explosions, car chases, all that kind of stuff. But like pork filling is very difficult.
I did not know that.
I didn't know either.
But did you have fun researching food? Was that part of your?
Yeah. We did a lot of dumplings were harmed in the making of this short. I like to joke about that. But yeah, like food, like. It was really important for me to just take like the whole crew, like the animation crew, the art team to San Francisco Chinatown and Oakland Chinatown to kind of like walk and shop and like just really just be immersed in that community that we were trying to depict and pay homage to in the short. And because I grew up in like going to Chinatown in Toronto, Canada, I was kind of familiar with that, so I was able to explain to the crew, like, oh, like, you know, like that old lady over there, she's like squeezing each of the tomatoes, and she's like sniffing it in a particular way because she wants to find the freshest one, and it was cool. It was just like me giving a tour of my culture.
That is great. Yeah. So in the intro, I had mentioned you have a background in animation, worked at Pixar, worked on Inside Out, and worked on Good Dinosaur and others. And so, when did you decide you wanted to write and direct, and how were you given that opportunity?
Yeah. So I came into Pixar as a storyboard artist, and for those of you who don't know, so storyboard artists, we basically draw what is in the script and give the director kind of a rough blueprint, like a visual idea of what their story is going to be. Like say if the script said like exterior, Andy's house, Woody and Buzz run across the lawn, I have to draw what that will roughly look like and show it to the filmmakers, and then they'll throw it away and make me redraw it. But being a story artist, you get exposure to directors and just like that creative filmmaking process. You work really closely with coming up with ideas, with gags, solving story problems. You're also kind of utilizing lots of different skills. Like I'm positioning the camera, I'm blocking out action, I'm like figuring out like acting for the characters. So already it's kind of like you're directing a little bit. And through storyboarding, that's kind of how I discovered that I really wanted to like make films myself and tell these stories that have been in my head for a while. And for Bao, I pitched it in 2015 with 2 other ideas, because sometimes Pixar will ask anyone at the studio, like it'd be like an open call for pitch ideas, and anyone can kind of sign up, and they'll have 5 minutes for each idea, and they have to come with 3, and it was kind of like American Idol a little bit, where it's like me in front of a panel of like executives and directors and producers, and then I kind of went through the rounds, and Bao ended up being chosen by the end. But then, yeah, like an early champion of it was Pete Docter, who I got to work with on Inside Out, and he's always loved quirky, offbeat kind of stories and ideas, and he's always looking for fresh ideas to turn into shorts, and he really loved the ending for Bao. Like that like surprised him and really shocked him and got him excited about the short. So he like I really owe it a lot.
Very emotional.
Yeah, I owe a lot to him.
Oh, I think that's great, and good for them for doing that. Plus, not to mention, they put it at the head of The Incredibles, which was great, so you got great exposure for it. But one last question. So, the lack of sound, which evokes so much emotion, was that just going back to your mom and the kind of the way they communicated or didn't? Was that intentional in that way?
Yeah. I think because I come from storyboarding and I love animation because it's such a visual storytelling medium, I really wanted to challenge myself and the whole crew to try to tell this story in the most visual way. And one way to do that is just to strip all of the dialogue away from it, because I really wanted everyone around the world to experience this short in the exact same way. So I didn't want language to be like a barrier to understand the story.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's great. Well, I'm kind of proud because I finished exactly when I wanted to for the round robin. Are we doing good? Everybody good? Just a round. All right, this is our round robin. I have 15 questions, so I'm going to start with Rayka. Rayka, call out a number, and then I will tell you what your question is.
Oh my gosh. 7.
7. All right, you have a choice, your biggest accomplishment or regret.
Oh, gosh.
Right off the top of your head.
Can I go last? My biggest accomplishment or regret? My biggest accomplishment.
Okay.
I'm not talking about my regrets today.
Right.
My biggest accomplishment. My first year at USC Film School, I was a junior, and my father passed away from lung cancer like 4 months into school. And I had the choice to leave school just, for the semester or to finish off the semester. And about a week after he passed, it was the hardest thing I ever decided to do, but I went back to school and I made my first short film, gathered like my whole class. And that for me was a really challenging and incredible process because I think it helped me kind of get myself back.
Right.
And it opened a lot of doors for me.
Right.
Yeah, and I hope I made my dad proud.
Well, I'm pretty sure. I think there's no question about that. All right, Betsy, what's the number?
4.
Number 4. Oh, where were you when you heard you were nominated?
My directing partner, Julie Cohen, and I had breakfast cooked by my husband at my apartment in New York City, and her husband was also there, a kind of homage to Marty Ginsburg, who was the big cook in the Ginsburg home, and he made us a delicious breakfast, and then we sat and watched the nomination.
Oh,
yeah,
that's great.
It was really, and it was just the 4 of us, and it was really wonderful because it's been fantastic to have a partner on this film, and Julie and I had not worked together so closely on something. It's not like we had this big collaboration. So this past really 4 years has brought us very close, and I'm just very grateful to her and happy to have that, and happy that we have these amazing supportive husbands. So, yeah.
Yes, that's great. Great. Okay, Marina.
10.
Oh, 10? Did you say 10? Marina, this is good. If you could work with any director,
Oh, gosh.
right? Say you won the film lottery and you could work with anybody, who would it be?
Ingmar Bergman.
Oh. And why? Tell us why.
He needs to come
back to life. Right? Okay. We got that. And is it because you just love his films?
Because, I was a huge fan of his films during my acting school because I think he goes really deep into acting. His films are a lot about going into the feelings that are suppressed and how they burst out in the most unbelievable way.
Yeah,
and
it's true.
Yeah, so that's why.
I love it. Great. Okay, Domee.
1.
Number 1. Biggest mistake beginners make.
Oh, snap.
Yeah.
So many. Biggest mistake, thinking that you have to know everything. I think that's the biggest mistake.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Not realizing that there are many talented people around you to trust and rely on, to collaborate with in order to make your vision come to life. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if you're insecure because you haven't done it, people, if you try to pretend, people see through that, don't they?
That's the worst.
That's the worst. Yeah, I'm with you. Ai-Ling?
6.
6. Oh, this is good for you. This is an excellent one.
Okay.
Well, the film industry is hard. We know that. It's not an easy place to work. So what's the biggest hurdle that you faced on your way coming up?
For me, being a sound designer, and a re-recording mixer, kind of like just to echo back what Nina had said, it's traditionally a very male-dominated industry, and so, for me, it's like, one may think that typically a film with like explosions or, rockets or sci-fi would go to sound mixers or sound editorial team that are predominantly male. It could be some kind of like, just unconsciously, yeah. So for me, when I came here, I knew that, I wanted to do sound design and mixing, and so one of the challenge was, just to show as much interest and try to work as hard as I can to, maybe, just say, hey, let me, do some of this design work or this gunfight or car chase, or, come up with like monster vocals or something. And I would remember, like, earlier on, like I would play it for some of my male coworkers, and then they are like mostly like super impressed or surprised, which shouldn't be the case.
Well, they obviously didn't know you grew up watching Terminator over and over and over and over.
So,
all right, Lynette.
This is terrifying. Number 2.
Number 2. Oh, no, this is good. Worst or best piece of advice you ever got?
That I ever got.
Is this terrifying, guys? I don't mean for it to be.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay, worst piece of, because I think sometimes we get bad advice.
Worst or best piece of advice I've ever gotten. The best advice, I'm going to say the best advice, actually, because the best advice, and I get it daily, and it's actually from my husband, who's a wonderful cheerleader of mine. And if I didn't have such a wonderful cheerleading husband who was a great co-parent, I wouldn't be able to do any of this. He always says to me to just trust my instincts, and I, need to be reminded of that on pretty much on a daily basis.
Yeah,
and so
that's great advice.
I try to give that back to other people too.
That is good. And when you don't, it always bites you in the ass.
I mean, that's the thing is, I also feel like no matter what industry you're in, no matter what you do, I feel like some of the strongest thing that we all possess is our instincts. Like, we know when we should or shouldn't be doing something. And I think also creatively, for me, my creative instincts are all I have to go on. Whether I'm choosing projects or any decision that you have to make on a daily basis, I'd rather make the wrong decision that at least I made with my own instincts than listen to somebody else's advice that I knew wasn't right and then have it not go the way that I wanted.
Good. Yeah, agreed. That's good. Nina?
Number 8.
Number 8. What's the one thing that motivates you each and every day to do your best?
I think because I've always had to work quite hard to get anywhere in sound, so I think every day I want it to be right, and I want it to look good, and I want it to sound good, and it's been, it's not been an easy road pushing through and having children and carrying on working the hours that we work, but it's so rewarding and enjoyable when it does look great. And I think particularly in my role doing a lot of dialogue and ADR, the end result needs to look like it was like that in the first place. So it's almost like my work, if it's done well, is invisible. And that's always the goal I'm trying to go with, is that everything that you see on screen, you don't even know you're seeing it. Suspension of disbelief, without question. It is what it is, and it looks how it should be. And it drives me nuts when I watch films and they don't look like that.
Right. I'm sure. Okay, Hannah.
I can't remember what numbers.
Okay. Pull out a number.
1 to 15, right?
Right.
I don't think 14. Nobody said 14, right?
No, this is good. 14 is good.
14.
Let's talk about rejection. These are all, this is like all of my I come up with all these because it's things I think about. So talk about rejection, overcoming.
Didn't work, did it?
No, I didn't. No. That was it. The question is, how'd you handle it?
Keep going.
Keep going, right? Yeah. Don't look back?
Yeah, just keep going. I mean, like, you know, rejection for me is fuel on the fire. You know? It really is. It's like, it was always just another challenge that was levied at me. So it was just like, no, okay, well, I'll see you in a year. And it just keeps you going. I never looked at it as a bad thing. I looked at it as a good thing because then, you know, once you start, but there's a certain point, I think everybody gets to a certain point in their careers where it just, I don't have to worry about rejection because I don't seek out the things that don't mean something to me.
Right.
I don't seek out the places where I could be rejected. You know what I mean? Like I'm not in any, you know, and for the most part, you know, you get to a place where you just feel like it's not, you just don't take it personal anymore. It's like, okay, right, it didn't work out, right? That means that it's not supposed to, like I'm not supposed to be here. Instead of like forcing, like I have to, like in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, you know, everything was Stella, you know, everything was so personal. Like they hate me. They're like, there's one pencil that's like out of place on a set. They're like, I don't know if that belongs there. You're like, the pencil, you know, and they're like, but everything else looks great. And you're like, but the pencil. And, you know, and then you think like, I'm never gonna, that's it, my whole career is over because I didn't want the pencil. But you get to a point where it's like, oh, okay, we'll just take that out and then keep it moving and just keep it moving because, you know, as a female in this business, as a woman of color in this business, that if you let any of that take you off course, every second counts for what you're doing. So you're just setting your, you know what I mean? Like taking rejection personal just sets yourself back. So I'm at the point now where I'm like, it doesn't, you know, there's something better around the corner. I always try to find the silver lining in a really like mean way, but I'm just kidding.
That's great. Okay, Louise, bring it home.
Okay, I'm gonna go for 13, unless somebody's already done it. 13.
Oh, this is good. It was actually, Domee brought this up. Are you good at pitching? And if so, what's your secret?
Oh, actually, I basically did this course in Europe that was called ASF, Animation Sans Frontier, and basically it was like an 8-week course where you learned how to pitch. So that really helped. But definitely for me, I kind of more of an introvert, to be honest. So it was something to just even be talking to people on my own. But one of the things that really helped me when I was pitching was when you're talking about something and it's your own project, nobody knows that project better than you. You're talking about something that you're passionate about. That makes it a lot easier. You know, they can't say to you, oh, are you sure that's correct? It's like, yes, it's my project. I know what it's about, you know. So I think it's just remembering that, like, to be passionate about, you know, thinking about why you were pitching it, why you want to make this project. And then if that enthusiasm comes through, I think that counts for a lot.
Oh, that's excellent advice. That's great. Well, round of applause for that.